Fractal Enigma Audio Previews and Stories presents The Rancher's Vow by Milo Hart. Prologue. 6 weeks ago, 2 in the morning, and Beau Hartley walked the fence line like a man patrolling for ghosts. The moon hung fat and white over the ranch, painting everything in shades of bone and shadow. Heat still rose from the cracked earth even at this hour. July in Arizona didn't believe in mercy. The air tasted like dust and sage. And somewhere in the distance, a coyote yipped at nothing. Beau didn't sleep much anymore. Hadn't for 5 years, if he was being honest. So instead of lying in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the silence where Maria's breathing used to be, he walked, checked the perimeter, counted fence posts, made sure everything was locked down tight, like the ranch was a forward operating base and not 3,000 acres of struggling cattle land. Old habits. The army had drilled them in deep, and grief had cemented them into place. He reached the guest cottage at 02:15, same as always. The small adobe structure sat 100 yards from the main house, far enough for privacy, close enough that he could see the porch from Ellie's bedroom window. He'd put the new nanny there 6 weeks ago, Luca, the musician from back east who'd answered his ad for a summer caretaker, whose references had been impeccable, and whose smile had been too bright for Beau to look at directly. The porch light was on. Beau stopped at the edge of the shadows, boots silent on the hard-packed dirt. He should keep walking, should finish his circuit and go back to the house, should do anything, except stand here in the dark like some kind of... Luca was sitting on the porch steps. Beau's breath caught. The younger man was hunched over, elbows on his knees, wearing a thin t-shirt that was almost see-through in the moonlight. His violin case sat open beside him, the instrument cradled against his chest like a child. Sheet music was scattered across the steps, pages and pages of it, some of it crumpled, some of it marked with pencil scratches that Beau could see even from this distance. Luca lifted the violin bow, set it against the strings, and then nothing. His hands shook. His hands shook. The bow trembled against the strings without making a sound. Luca's shoulders rose and fell with a breath that looked like it hurt. And he tried again. Drew the bow across. A thin, wavering note emerged. Wrong. Somehow even to Beau's untrained ear. Broken. Luca stopped. Stared at his hands like they belonged to a stranger. And then he crumpled. Not dramatically. Luca didn't seem like the dramatic type, despite what his bright clothes and easy laughter might suggest. He just folded in on himself, silent and small, and pressed his face into his hands. His shoulders shook. No sound carried across the distance between them. But Beau knew what crying looked like. Had done enough of it himself in the months after Maria died, alone in the barn where Ellie couldn't see. Beau should leave. This was private. This was none of his business. Luca was his employee, nothing more. The latest in a string of nannies who would inevitably quit when they realized that working for a silent, stone-faced rancher in the middle of nowhere wasn't worth the paycheck. But he didn't leave. He stood there, rooted to the shadows, and watched Luca cry. After a long moment, Luca's head came up. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, an angry gesture, impatient with his own weakness. He looked at the sheet music scattered around him, and something dark crossed his face, something Beau recognized. Despair. Luca grabbed the nearest page and crumpled it in his fist. Then the next. Then the next. He threw them toward the trash bin at the edge of the porch, violent little missiles of failure. When the sheet music was gone, he looked down at the bow still clutched in his white-knuckled grip. Beau's stomach dropped. Don't. Luca brought the bow down across his knee and snapped it in half. The crack of breaking wood carried across the night like a gunshot. Luca stared at the two pieces in his hands for a long moment, breathing hard. Then he threw them toward the trash bin too, stood up, and went inside without looking back. The porch light clicked off. Beau stood in the dark and counted his heartbeats. 1, 2, 3. Waiting for the twist in his chest to ease, for his hands to stop itching with the urge to what? Go after him? Say something? He hadn't said more than 10 words at a time to Luca in 6 weeks. Communicated mostly through notes on the kitchen counter and grunts that Luca had somehow learned to interpret. Beau didn't know how to comfort anyone. Hadn't even managed to comfort his own daughter when Maria died. He should go home. Go to bed. Forget he'd seen this. Instead, Beau crossed the distance to the guest cottage porch and knelt beside the trash bin. The crumpled papers were still warm from Luca's hands. Beau gathered them carefully, like they might shatter if he moved too fast. There were 7 pages in total, covered in musical notation that meant nothing to him. He couldn't read music, had never learned, had never wanted to. Maria had tried to teach him once, laughing at his fumbling attempts, her fingers guiding his on the piano keys. He shoved that memory down hard. The broken bow was in 2 pieces at the bottom of the bin. Beau fished them out, turned them over in his rough hands. The wood was smooth and expensive looking, warm from where Luca had gripped it. The break was clean, right through the middle of the stick, splintering the delicate ribbon wrapping at the handle. Beau didn't know music, but he knew wood. Had been working with his hands since he could walk, building and fixing and carving. His grandfather had taught him. Then his father. Then the army had refined the skill into something precise and useful. He looked at the broken bow and saw the grain pattern, the quality of the craftsmanship, the exact angle of the fracture. He could fix this. The thought surfaced before he could stop it, and once it was there, it wouldn't leave. Beau gathered the papers and the broken bow and walked to his workshop. The workshop was the one place on the ranch that belonged entirely to him. It sat in the back of the main barn, behind a door that was always locked. Ellie knew better than to try to get in, not because Beau had ever raised his voice to her, but because she understood, the way she understood most things, that her father needed somewhere to hide. The space was small and neat. Tools hung in precise rows on the walls, workbenches worn smooth from years of use. It smelled like sawdust and varnish, and the linseed oil he used on the leather tack. It smelled like peace. Beau set the broken bow on his main workbench, under the lamp that cast a pool of warm light in the otherwise dark space. He smoothed out the crumpled sheet music 1 page at a time, his calloused fingers gentle on the thin paper. The pages were covered in pencil marks, notes, corrections, whole sections scribbled out and rewritten. Someone had been working hard on this music. Someone had been trying. Someone had given up. Beau found an empty binder on the shelf above his workbench. He'd bought a box of them years ago for keeping track of equipment manuals, receipts, breeding records. His handwriting was rough. Maria had always teased him about it, but he took his time with the label. Luca. He slid the smoothed pages into the plastic sleeves, one by one, arranged them in order of how crumpled they'd been, which felt like the right way to organize them even if it didn't make logical sense. The most damaged ones went first, the ones Luca had crushed the hardest, the ones that must have hurt the most to throw away. When binder was full, Beau turned his attention to the bow. The break was worse than he'd thought. The wood had splintered along the grain, and the delicate horsehair strands that made up the actual bow part, the part that touched the strings, were tangled and frayed. He didn't know if those could be replaced or if they needed to be. Didn't know anything about violin bows, except that this one had been cared for once. The wood was polished smooth from years of use. The handle darkened where Luca's fingers had gripped it. Beau ran his thumb along the broken edge. This belonged to someone who loved it. Someone who doesn't love it anymore. The thought hit too close to home. He felt like that, after Maria, like something essential had broken inside him, and he'd wanted to snap the rest of himself in half just to be done with the pain. He hadn't. He'd had Ellie to think about. But some days, in those first dark months, it had been a near thing. Beau set the bow pieces down and stared at them for a long time. He could fix this. Not perfectly. The repair would always be visible. But there was a technique he'd read about once, years ago, in one of Maria's art magazines, Japanese, something about filling cracks with gold, making the breaks part of the history instead of hiding them, making the broken thing more beautiful than it had been before. Kintsugi. That was the word. He didn't have gold, but he had gold-colored wire, fine enough for jewelry work. Had woodworking tools that could carve details too small to see without squinting. Had time. Endless, empty hours between midnight and dawn when sleep wouldn't come and the silence of the house pressed in like a physical weight. He had nothing but time. Beau pulled out his smallest carving knife and got to work. 4 in the morning. The bow was still in pieces on his workbench, but he'd made a plan. He'd need to sand down the broken edges first, get them perfectly smooth. Then carve a channel for the wire that would bind them together. He'd have to research violin bows, figure out the right tension, the right angle of the repair, whether the horsehair could be salvaged or needed to be replaced. It would take weeks, maybe longer. He had weeks. Beau looked at the binder on the shelf. Luca, written in his rough handwriting. He looked at the broken bow under the lamp. He thought about the way Luca had crumpled in on himself, silent and alone, crying in the dark where no one could see. Except Beau had seen, and now he was keeping a grown man's trash in his private workshop, like some kind of obsessive creep, and he couldn't explain why, except that watching Luca throw away pieces of himself had felt wrong, had felt like a wound that needed stitching. Beau didn't have soft things left in him. Maria had taken all of that when she died, or maybe the grief had just calcified it into something hard and useless. He couldn't comfort Ellie the way she needed, couldn't talk to the women in town who tried to set him up with their daughters and nieces, couldn't even make conversation with the man who'd been living on his property for 6 weeks. But he could fix broken things. That, at least, he was good at. And something about Luca, something about the brightness of his smile, and the warmth of his laughs, and the gentle way he signed to Ellie, treating her deafness like a language to learn, instead of a problem to solve. It made Beau want to fix this. Made him want to take all those crumpled pieces and smooth them back into shape. Made him want to give Luca back the parts of himself he'd thrown away. I'm keeping his trash because I'm a sad, lonely bastard who doesn't know how to talk to people. That was probably the truth. Probably the whole truth. But underneath, that truth was another one. Quieter and more dangerous. I'm keeping his trash because I watched him throw away a piece of his soul. And I couldn't leave it in the dirt. Beau turned off the lamp and locked the workshop behind him. Dawn was still an hour away, but the sky was starting to lighten at the edges, turning the desert from black to deep blue. He walked back to the main house, past the guest cottage where Luca was probably asleep, past the paddock where Ellie's pony was nickering softly at the approaching morning. He didn't look back at the cottage, didn't let himself think about Luca curled up in bed, face still damp from crying, hands empty of the bow he'd broken. He had work to do, a ranch to run, a daughter to raise, a life that didn't have room for whatever this feeling was. This twist in his chest, this itch in his palms, this desperate, inexplicable need to save a man he'd barely spoken to. Beau went inside, washed the sawdust off his hands, and started the coffee maker. In 4 hours, Luca would knock on the back door, smile that too bright smile, and sign good morning to Ellie. He'd pretend he hadn't spent the night crying. Beau would pretend he hadn't seen, and the broken bow would wait in the workshop, patient as a promise.